Each morning when I enter the kitchen, I find my sourdough starter sitting on the kitchen counter, waiting patiently to be fed. Since my wife and I don't have a cat or a dog, my sourdough starter is our family pet. But today is different. I will be adding cinnamon and craisins to my daily sourdough bread. Hi, I'm Ron, and thanks for clicking on this video. If you'd like to be notified of my future videos, please click the subscribe button and notification bell. Okay then, let's begin. My 2-loaf sourdough bread recipe calls for 200 grams of starter. So the first thing I need to do is feed my starter 100 grams of water and 100 grams of mixing flour. My mixing flour consists of 1/3 rye flour, 1/3 all-purpose flour, and 1/3 whole wheat flour. I use filtered water from the dispenser on my refrigerator door and keep it in this bottled water container. I store my water in a kitchen cupboard at room temperature, and I keep my mixing flour in this metal container in the fridge. I place my sourdough starter in this proofing box until it has doubled in volume, which takes about 3 hours. After feeding the sourdough starter, I measure 2 cups of craisins and cover them in water. An hour before the sourdough starter doubles in volume, I mix 600 grams of water with 900 grams of bread flour. Mixing the water and the flour before adding the starter and the salt is called autolyse. The benefit of autolyse is to produce a better texture, rise, and flavor. Cinnamon, which I am including in today's dough, tends to decrease fermentation, and so I'm adding autolyse to offset the effect of cinnamon. The flour and water are mixed, and the dough is set aside for 1 hour. The dough has autolyse for 1 hour, and it's time to incorporate the sourdough starter and the salt into the dough. As you can see, the sourdough starter has doubled in volume. My 2-loaf recipe calls for 200 grams of sourdough starter and 20 grams of salt. And now to incorporate the ingredients. The dough has rested 30 minutes since the flour, water, salt, and sourdough starter were mixed together, and it's time for the first stretch and fold. I think I need to get a little more water on my hands. It's now been 1 hour since mixing and the dough has had a second 30-minute rest. It's time to add the cinnamon. I'm adding 1 teaspoon. One more teaspoon of cinnamon. It's now been an hour and a half since mixing, and the dough has had a third 30-minute rest. It's time to add the craisins. It's now been 2 hours since mixing, and the dough has had its fourth 30-minute rest, and time for some coil fold. After which, I'll let the dough rest until it is increased in volume by 25%, which should take about 2 hours. The dough is increased in volume by 25%, and it's time to pre-shape, shape, and put into bannetons and into the fridge for overnight. Here's a better view of the dough and how it has increased in volume. I have been asked, why do I pull the dough across my workbench? The answer is to increase surface tension. As I pull the dough from the back and the front of the dough faces resistance from the board, the only direction it can go is up. Look closely and you can see the dough rise as I pull it. The dough is rested about 5 minutes and it's time for final shaping and placing the dough into the bannetons. I like to put a little rice flour in the center of the banneton, along with some bread flour to prevent the dough from sticking in the banneton. I've also been asked, why do I pinch the dough when I put it in the basket? As before, the answer is to maintain the surface tension of the dough, to maintain its tightness or tautness. It's now the following day and time to bake the dough. I loosen the dough around the edges of the banneton, grab my bread sling, which I've really enjoyed using, use my fingers to loosen any remaining sticky points, and voila! One slice across the top, set this aside and grab my Dutch oven. I use two large 5-quart cast iron Dutch ovens. They've been preheating in my oven at 450 degrees for 30 minutes. And here's our other loaf of bread. Loosen the dough. Bread sling. Flip it over. One slice across the top. Set it aside and grab the other Dutch oven. These will bake for 30 minutes at 450 degrees. It's now been 30 minutes. The exciting moment when you take the lid off and whoa, look how beautiful that bread is. Grab my spatula, lift it out, and put it back in the oven at 400 degrees for 15 more minutes. Okay, looks like both loaves are done. Aren't they beautiful? Let me grab my thermometer and we'll do a quick check. I want it to be over 200 degrees. Looks like this one is slightly, and this one 204. Okay, both of them over 200 degrees. I love this bread, and it smells amazing. Now the hour-long wait before I cut into it. Words cannot describe how ecstatic I am about this bread. I've already tasted it, and it is amazingly delicious. I strongly encourage you to give this recipe and method a try. I promise you will not regret it. And thanks for watching.